We have been getting a lot of Sonic content recently. In the past couple of years, we have gotten not one, not two, not three, but two mainline Sonic games. Those being Sonic Frontiers and Sonic Superstars, of course. And say what you will about those games, but I personally really enjoyed both of them. However, they definitely have their flaws, but one flaw that they share in common is their endings. Before Frontiers and Superstars, Sonic games generally had fantastic endings. Some were definitely more climatic than others, but all of them were at the very least satisfying and served as a solid conclusion to the game. Sonic Unleashed's ending is by far the best conclusion to a Sonic game, ever. For one, the final level was a pure test of skill, as it was 45 minutes of challenging level design and combat. Then we had a final boss that had you traveling to the center of the earth to fight a literal god with Supersonic. Then to top it all off, the pure emotion of the ending of this game can make a grown man cry, as the main character and companion of this game, Chip, just f***ing dies. It was truly fantastic. And of course we had endings to games like Colors and Generations, which weren't nearly as impactful as the ending of Unleashed, but they were passable because the entirety of Colors, Generations, Lost World, and even Forces wasn't nearly as cinematic, or even on the same scale as Unleashed. They were all short and sweet games that had small conclusions, and they were passable. But then we have Sonic Frontiers. This game looked massive. It was definitely the most ambitious Sonic game since Unleashed, if not the most ambitious Sonic game of all time. The story was very interesting and mysterious, but what really got me hyped to see the ending of the game, and by extension the final boss, was the Supersonic Titan fights. These were the best things the Sonic series has ever put out, and they were only the normal boss fights. I could only imagine what the final boss would look like. It wasn't this. So let's rewind a bit. The islands of Sonic Frontiers were getting larger and larger as you progressed. We started with Kronos, which was a pretty good first island, then we got to Ares, which encouraged more exploration, and then we got to Chaos, which had really difficult enemies, and it took some effort when it came to traversal. But then we got to Aranos, which was just more of the first island. Red flag number 1, why was the entirety of this game building up to what was just cut content from the first island of the game? Red flag number 2, this island had absolutely no story whatsoever. You just kinda ran around getting the Chaos Emeralds to fight whatever the hell the final boss was going to be. And red flag number 3, what seemed to be the final boss at first just ended up being a trashy reskin of the first boss that was piss easy. Oh wait, it's not over? There's more? I wish there wasn't. What the hell, man? I talked about this boss fight numerous times in the past, and I'll say it again. This is terrible, and such an anticlimactic way to end the game that had amazing boss fights. But instead of an actual good final boss, we get a bullet hell minigame against a boss that has a design that isn't even that menacing. It's just a purple moon. And the actual conclusion to the story was underwhelming too, as the characters are just kinda like, oh, well, that happened. Let's just go home. Now, Sage, one of the new characters in this game, also died, but we didn't really gain any emotional attachment to her character because it was only at the end of the game that she turned into the good guy. But yeah, Sonic Frontiers had a bad ending. It just wasn't a satisfying conclusion to a game on this scale. Now thankfully they did fix this game's ending in the final Horizon, but why wasn't this the ending in the first place? But anyway, Sonic Superstars dropped not even a year after Frontiers, and I wasn't expecting it to have a story at all. What it ended up having was a fairly simple plot that was more than passable for the game as a whole. However, the secret last story of the game included a final boss that has absolutely no foreshadowing whatsoever. So in Superstars, there are a total of 3 stories. You play through the main story, which allows you to play as all the characters and collect the Chaos Emeralds and all that good stuff. The main story ended with a pretty solid final boss and ending to the game. But then you unlock Trip's story, which allows you to play a harder version of the main game as the new character, Trip. And this was honestly pretty fun if you ask me. It just felt very unpolished. The level design was very unfair at times, but it was good post-game content nonetheless. But if you chose to actually beat Trip's story, you unlock the secret final boss fight, which included a supersonic fight against a dragon. Where did this dragon come from? I really couldn't tell you. The only hints we had of this thing's existence throughout the entire game were Eggman drawing a dragon to show Trip and Fang, a mural at the end of Golden Capital Act Knuckles, which was an optional level mind you, and this weird stone thing in Speed Jungle on the world map. That was it. Even with all of that though, this was out of f***ing nowhere. The boss fight itself is pretty decent. It's not nearly as bad as Frontiers' final boss, as it's an actual Sonic boss fight, but still, it was weird. The entirety of Superstars' ending just felt kind of unpolished, really. Trip's story felt very shoehorned in just to extend the game's playtime. The level design also felt pretty lazy as it added more quote-unquote challenge by adding more bottomless pits and enemies. And then of course the reward for getting through that bullshit was a janky Supersonic boss fight, against something that came out of absolutely nowhere. So that means that 2 Sonic games in a row had bad endings. That's a little weird, isn't it? Look, I know that games before Frontiers also had pretty bad endings, like Forces for example, but Forces as a whole was bad, so it was fitting. Frontiers and Superstars, on the other hand, were very good games that had anticlimactic and generally bullshit endings. I don't know why this is becoming a problem for Sonic games. Is it due to rushed development? Yeah, probably. The majority of Frontiers fans are well aware of the large amount of cut content that game had, and it was all removed due to time constraints. I wouldn't be surprised if Superstars were in a similar situation. And the solution to all of this is fairly simple. Just give the developers more time to finish the game. Look at Super Mario Wonder. Supposedly, there was absolutely no deadline for that game. Nintendo was basically just like, it's finished when it's finished, and it turned out to be a masterpiece of a game. What if Sega allowed Sonic Team to take as much time as they needed to make the next Sonic game? I truly believe that Sonic Team has the right resources to make a game as good as Mario Wonder. That is, if they're given enough development time. Will this actually happen? Probably not. I mean, we all know by now that Sega isn't really the best company when it comes to how they treat their developers. So let's just hope that they come to their senses and realize that giving developers more time to work on Sonic games is a good thing. But that's going to end this video, everybody. Let me know what you all think about new Sonic games having trash endings in the comments down below. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.